No se trata de tener suficientes papitas de McDonald's. Se trata de tener suficiente ketchup para asegurarte que cada papita tenga un turno. A menos que te atrevas a comer las papitas sin ketchup. Psst, te prometo que igual te seguirán encantando. Para, pa, pa, pa.
At some point in our family life, we had to hastily leave an apartment where we were living. I never knew the reasons why we did it, but one night we took out almost everything we could. We loaded it onto a truck belonging to a friend of my dad's and ended up in a neighborhood in a colony that I didn't know, but that I knew was one of the bad ones. This neighborhood was more like a large plot of dirt ground, with 7 little wooden houses, all raised half a meter from the ground, supported by thick posts that I doubted could hold them up with people inside. They were so old. We lived there for almost a month. There we learned to live with a ghost, with one that entertained us greatly. At first, my sister Clara and I, Clarita was 4 years old at that time. She stayed behind me at all times. We played a lot outside, in the neighborhood patio, when our parents weren't there, which at that time was almost every day. And something very curious happened. The ghost that inhabited our house seemed to have an obsession with organizing everything. When we moved some furniture in the house, we would mess it up, and when we returned, it was already arranged again, organized as it was originally. It always happened without fail. Clarita was the first to notice and tell my mom that there was a ghost there. They made fun of her. They told her that if this ghost was going to be organizing, then all the better. I think they thought she was doing it to play. But at night I heard my mom tell my dad when they thought we had already fallen asleep. She told him that what they had been warned about was true, that the girls had seen something. My dad told her it would only be a few more weeks to hold on, and my mom continued ignoring what we told her, and for us it was fun. We could intentionally move something out of place, mess it up just to go out and play for a few minutes, and when we returned, realized that without fail, everything had returned to how it was. Sometimes we moved things just to see if it would happen, and it always happened. It didn't matter if it was something small like a cup or something bigger like a chair. When we returned, everything was in its place. Always, without exception. It was very fun. We imagined it like a fairy of order that would always be there to fix whatever we did. But things wouldn't be like that forever. I started playing a lot with a girl my age who lived in some houses in a similar neighborhood next door. She would come over to play with me and Clarita, who played with us sometimes, but at other times ran in and out of the house, playing with the ghost, messing everything up more and more to test it. Until one of those times she went in and nothing was organized. Everything that she had moved out of place this time, everything she had thrown on the floor was exactly as she had thrown it. It started to get dark, and that little house, cold as it was, had remained almost completely in shadows. Clarita came out crying, screaming desperately, holding her face. We checked her. She had a very marked slap, as if an adult had hit her with all their strength. She told us that when she went in, she saw someone. Something that seemed to be a figure in the darkness looking at everything around, looking at the mess angrily. She said something very strange. My sister described that this figure looked like her birthday photo. A photo that was taken of her that had been ruined because it got wet, leaving it blurry. She said that's how this figure looked until it came closer. When it came out of the darkness running toward her, and before it hit her she could see it. It was a girl, a very tall girl, with a body like a very fat lady, with furious eyes. Before Clarita could even turn around, while she was taking steps backward, that thing went from one side of the little house to the other in a second and hit her. My parents were about to give me a beating thinking that I had hit her, although Clarita screamed at them that I hadn't. My friend ran to get a neighbor, and it was this lady who tried to convince my parents that in that house we weren't and wouldn't be alone. At no point did she tell them that there was something violent, something full of anger. And although it looked like that, and I wasn't sure if it was a girl, my mom asked her if it was about someone who had lived there. And the lady told her that she couldn't be sure about that the only thing she knew for certain was that in that place, horrible, violent things had happened. My sister went with my parents to work every day from then on, for the rest of the 2 weeks we were there. I spent all day playing with my friend in the neighboring patio. The little time I was in that house, I did it in silence, trying not to make her angry, without moving absolutely anything out of place. I always felt that she was there watching everything, and that at any moment, if I moved something I didn't want to, she was going to appear again. Hello, community. I hope to find you in the best way, with great health, and ready to listen to the following tales of the night. The following stories that the community has shared, and that I am completely sure that today, whether you want it or not, will stay with you once the episode ends, when you prepare to sleep, when you're about to turn off the light in your room, when you have to get up to go to the bathroom for a moment. You'll have not only the sensation, but the certainty that something is waiting for you there. Remember that if it happens to you, not everything is bad, because at least you'll be the next protagonist of this program. With all the love in the world, it's time to enter this darkness, to forget all the problems and leave them outside, because they can't enter here. Only you, who are already delving into the following tales of the night. Good night, Uriel, and to all the Tales of the Night community. My name is Sebastian Fuentes, and I've been a follower of the channel since 2021. I've always admired the respect and trust that exists among everyone here. My favorite story is The Beast, and since I heard it, I've wanted to share one of the many anecdotes that have been told to me and some that I've lived. This story isn't mine, but from a co-worker whom I'm going to call Pepe. It's a very long story, but when he told it to me, it left my skin crawling. Below I share what Pepe told me. He was around 15 years old when his parents bought a plot of land where they planned to build a house. During that time, they had to go to the place frequently to help with the first jobs. The journey wasn't that long, about 20 minutes approximately. Besides his parents, his cousins, and his grandmother usually accompanied him, although she, more than helping, just went to supervise them. When they had some rooms ready to avoid the hassle, it was more practical to stay and sleep there, although the cold of the area being surrounded by fields was quite intense. One of those mornings, his cousins, who were a couple of years younger than him, decided to explore the nearby lands. They were restless children, those who were always bothering, and while exploring an area of cornfields, they came across something that caught their attention. A small mountain of stones and dirt with a wooden cross on top. The cross looked old and worn, and without thinking too much about it, Pepe started making a fuss. Between jokes and laughter, it occurred to him that it would be a good idea to undo the mound. At one point, he took the cross with both hands and pulled it from the earth effortlessly. Then he threw it as far as he could. Satisfied with their little prank, they went back to the house without worrying about anything. They were children, and hadn't done anything that seemed important. That night, Pepe slept in the same room as his older brother. He doesn't know exactly what time, but at some point he woke up with a strange sensation. The first thing he noticed was a smell that filled the environment. It was a smell of smoke, like a cigar, like those that older gentlemen smoke, but combined with something else, like a stench that turned his stomach, something similar to the smell of dead animals. He got up in the darkness, feeling how the cold of the night crept between the walls. He searched with his gaze for the origin of the smell, and it was then that he saw him. In a corner of the room, barely illuminated by the moonlight that timidly entered, there was a man. He couldn't see his face, only the lower part of his face and a thick mustache full of gray hair. That man was looking down, smoking non-stop. He was tall, taller than his dad. He wore a brown leather jacket and worn pants, also a hat that covered part of his face. But there was something else. something that Pepe didn't notice until seconds after seeing him. The man wasn't leaning against the wall. The man had no feet. He was floating, and in his hands he held something that Pepe recognized immediately, the cross that he himself had pulled out and thrown that morning. He knew he couldn't run and leave his brother there, but he couldn't find the words to wake him up, to ask for help. Desperately, he gave him some hits on the arm, but his brother didn't even move. Then he did the only thing he could do. He got under the covers. He squeezed his eyes shut and tried to convince himself that it was just a dream. He tried to control his breathing, forcing himself to calm down. He felt like his heart was going to stop at any moment, and the smell of cigar felt stronger and stronger, as if that man was getting closer. Suddenly, the smell disappeared, from one moment to another, as if it had never been there. But Pepe didn't dare to uncover himself. He simply cried from fear until he fell asleep. The next morning, still with the fear present, he went down to breakfast and through tears told his mom what he had seen. She, not knowing what to do, decided to talk to his grandmother. Pepe didn't expect the caliber of the scolding that fell on him. His grandmother was furious. She told him he had no idea what he had done and forced him to return to the place to look for the cross and put it back in its place. Pepe, accompanied by his cousins, spent hours trying to find it. When they finally succeeded, his grandmother ordered them to pray an Our Father for each stone they had moved. They did it without questioning anything. His cousins hadn't gone through the same experience as him, maybe because they had only removed stones. But Pepe was convinced that what had happened that night hadn't been a simple nightmare. Sometime later, Pepe found out something else. Being at his mother-in-law's house, whom he had known for a little over 2 years, they started looking at family photo albums. Among the oldest images, one in particular caught his attention. It was him, the same man in the brown jacket with the hat, with the same gray mustache. The man who had visited him that night. The ghost of the cross turned out to be a relative of who would later become his wife, as if he had always been destined to be close to him. Thank you very much for the space, Uriel. Although I know this story isn't the most terrifying, it personally left me with a feeling of uneasiness since I heard it. I hope that someday I can hear it on the podcast.
No se trata de tener suficientes papitas de McDonald's. Se trata de tener suficiente ketchup para asegurarte que cada papita tenga un turno. A menos que te atrevas a comer las papitas sin ketchup. Psst, te prometo que igual te seguirán encantando. Para pa pa pa.
I really thought too much about telling this story. I've always been reserved with this type of topic, believing that if you don't tell it, maybe it didn't happen. One tries to convince themselves that things can be explained somehow, that there's a logical or scientific reason for everything. But when you don't find it, you're left with the doubt of whether what you experienced was real or just a product of your imagination. 4 years ago, I moved with my son to an apartment that was located on a main avenue. For us, it was a good option because it was close to his dad's house, and that way, he and his family could be aware of anything. When we arrived, the apartment was practically empty. We barely had the basics: 2 beds, a refrigerator, a television, and little else. Not having furniture, every sound bounced off the walls. Anything that fell caused a strange echo that made the place feel even colder and more uncomfortable. It didn't feel like a home. From the first night, my son felt restless. He didn't like being alone in his room and asked me to let him sleep with me. But since he already did that when we lived at my mom's house, I thought it was something normal, that he just had to get used to the new house. I told him he was a big boy, that he had to sleep in his room, although deep down I also felt something strange in the atmosphere. I thought it was just the feeling of being in a new place, in a place so empty, so silent, that it felt like it didn't belong to anyone. My bedroom had a window that faced the service patio of the apartment below. In that patio, they had built a small bathroom, and the structure was right next to my window. I always thought that made it easier for someone to climb up to my apartment and enter through there without much difficulty. And the fact that that apartment, the one below, was unoccupied, made me more nervous, because if something happened, there would be no one to notice. For that reason, I mostly avoided staying home for long periods. I preferred to be at my mom's house until I had no more excuses to keep avoiding my own house. My new home. The day I decided to stay, I forced myself to stop postponing things. So I finished organizing the apartment. I installed the curtains in my son's room. I hung a black Jesus Christ on the wall and the clay picture with his guardian angel. I finished around 10 o'clock at night. I put him to bed. That night it took me a long time to fall asleep. But when I finally did, it wasn't long before something woke me up. It was something strange, a discomfort I couldn't explain. I opened my eyes and saw something standing at the foot of my bed, looking at me. It was a tall man with a wide-brimmed hat. From the sides of his head protruded curly and disheveled hair. He wore a black raincoat that blended with the shadows of the room. He was looking at me fixedly. But the worst was his smile. A fake smile, as if it had been frozen on him. His teeth seemed too big, too white, almost like those of a cartoon. They didn't seem human, but like someone thinks they're human. His eyes were wide open, fixed on me, as if he had been there for a long time waiting for me to wake up. Of course, fear ran through my whole body, and without thinking, I got up abruptly. I ran out of the bedroom and locked myself in my son's room. I locked the door. I grabbed the only thing I had at hand, a hammer that I had left there the night before. I woke up my son without giving him many explanations. I told him that someone had gotten into the apartment. I wrapped him in sheets and lifted him to the window. My love, whatever you hear, when I shout at you, you get down through the window, okay? I whispered to him. He, although confused, nodded without asking questions. I left the bedroom with the hammer in my hand. I went through the apartment from end to end expecting to find someone, but everything was in its place. There was no trace of anyone, or that someone had gotten in. I returned to my son, and trying not to worry him more, I told him that maybe it had been my imagination, that I had imagined something. He believed me. He made a couple of jokes about it, and that night we slept together. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be the last time I saw that being with the hat. Some months passed. The apartment already had more furniture. Everything was going much more normally, although sometimes the atmosphere still felt strange. From time to time, my son told me that he had heard someone walking while he was playing in his room. But whenever we went to check, the house was empty. One night in September, while watching television in my room, I fell deeply asleep. I woke up again abruptly and saw him again. But he wasn't at the foot of the bed. He was next to me. His face was much closer. His smile was the same, and his eyes too wide open that looked at me with an intensity that made me feel like I couldn't even breathe. I had nowhere to run. I had no choice but to close my eyes tightly and cover myself with the sheets, like a child, as if that could make him disappear. I didn't know how much time passed. I just waited, holding my breath until I felt like the daylight was starting to come through the window. Only then did I dare to uncover myself. He was no longer there. Days later, while traveling on public transportation, something even stranger happened. Perhaps the strangest thing in this story. A strange woman began to look at me insistently. At first I tried to ignore her, but every so often her gaze would drift to my side again, as if she were seeing something next to me. She did this several times until she approached me. She took my knee and told me, "Who is he? Who is that man with the hat?" My heart stopped for a second. I took off my headphones to pay attention and asked her, trying to think that I hadn't heard correctly. "Who?" "Next to you. The man with the hat got on with you." My throat went dry. "I don't know what you're talking about, ma'am." But she looked at me seriously. And then again she looked at the empty space next to me. "You haven't seen him yet. Because you surely will. Right now he's not looking at you. Then she described his appearance exactly. The appearance I already knew. She told me he wore a hat, that hair came out from the sides, that he wore a black raincoat. She told me he was smiling in my direction, but that he looked at her sideways, that he seemed to get upset because she was talking to me, because she could see him, and obviously I didn't know what to answer her. Luckily, at that moment more people got on the transportation. One of them sat right next to me, occupying that empty space, and the lady told me not to worry anymore, that for now he had left. I don't know what happened. I truly have no explanation for what I saw or for what that woman described with such precision. If it had been a dream, then what about this woman? I don't understand how to explain it. Of course, I wasn't willing to stay in that place to find out who he was. I didn't care about discovering it. I didn't care about investigating anything. I moved as soon as I could.
No se trata de tener suficientes papitas de McDonald's. Se trata de tener suficiente ketchup para asegurarte que cada papita tenga un turno, a menos que te atrevas a comer las papitas sin ketchup. Psst, te prometo que igual te seguirán encantando. Para pa pa pa.
Hello, Tales of the Night community. I've been listening to the channel for quite some time, and like many others, it helps me cope with delicate situations in my life. I'll tell you my name, but I ask that in the story I remain anonymous. I'm 28 years old, and I'm from Querétaro. I live in a small town somewhat removed from the city that until a few years ago was a very quiet place. However, lately a large number of people, mostly young people, have committed suicide. It's a strange phenomenon, and although several families have been affected, no one has bothered to investigate thoroughly what could be happening. I want to mention that I have a pending story to send you. It's been very difficult to write it, since doing so implies remembering, and that has been extremely painful for the reasons I already mentioned. But we'll leave that story for another occasion. Today, I want to share something I never imagined telling here, and much less imagined living. This happened just yesterday, right at the beginning of the year, due to very delicate situations in my life related to the suicide of people who were important to me. I've required specialized help. For months I've been attending therapy weekly. Although the wounds have healed almost completely, I continue attending to keep improving as a person. I know many don't give importance to this type of help, but in my case it's been fundamental. In my case, the progress has been evident and everything was going well until yesterday, January 2nd. I attended my consultation as always. This time the topics were quite simple. Work matters, and some changes in my job that truthfully didn't worry me too much. Despite that, I prefer not to interrupt my appointments until my therapist considers that I'm ready for discharge. It was rather a calm day without stress, and everything seemed to indicate that I would end the night with a favorable consultation. However, what happened during the session was strange. I really don't know what to call it. Maybe from listening to stories from the channel I could describe it as a glitch in reality, but I prefer that you judge. The consultation began normally. However, approximately halfway through I started noticing strange things. At one point I looked away, as I usually do when trying to remember something. And when I looked back at my therapist, her eyes were different. Each one was looking in very opposite directions, as if they were trying to look toward her ears. It was a couple of seconds, but it disconcerted me. At first I thought it was me who was perceiving wrong, but as the session progressed, this happened repeatedly. Every time her eyes deviated in that way, I tried to convince myself that maybe it had been an optical illusion, a perception error. I should mention that my therapist doesn't wear glasses, so I ruled out a reflection or something similar. This wasn't the only thing at that moment. Her facial expressions began to change strangely, as if they were trying to deform. However, it was as if she stopped them, as if she avoided doing it to return to normal. It was disturbing because during this process it seemed like she was getting stuck. I didn't hear her smoothly, as if there was a glitch in a movie, like an internet video when it gets stuck. Although I felt shocked, I tried to maintain calm. I continued talking as if nothing was happening, so as not to lose control or seem altered. But there was a moment when she looked at me fixedly with an expression that left me frozen. It was as if she knew that I had realized what was happening. I left the consultation in silence. My parents and my sister picked me up to go to dinner. And honestly, at that moment, I didn't want to think about it too much. I think I was still in some kind of shock. However, when I got home a couple of hours later, that's when I really processed what had happened. I still can't find any logical explanation for it. I have no idea what to think. Now I'm waiting for my next consultation, like every week. But I'm anxious to know if something similar will happen again. Thank you for reading me. Even if this story isn't published, I feel calm sharing it with you. I send you greetings from Querétaro, and I wish you very good nights.